Entering the atmosphere in T minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Omega Metroid podcast from OmegaMetroid.com. My name is Andy Spiteri, joined by Doominal Crossing Doom. How are you today?
Well, as you can see, we're rocking the stash today, no beard. I attempted to trim my beard and, it kind of didn't go great. A lot of patches everywhere. And so I was like, okay, the only way we can save this now is to just take the whole thing off. But the mustache still intact. So I figured, you know what? Let's keep the mustache. Try something a little bit new that we don't usually do. So that is the lore behind the mustache that you see with you today.
Getting a head start on Movember, as it were.
Yes.
Yes. Well, that's good. It looks nice. You've got the. I was thinking of the guard from Orange Is the New Black. It's kind of got that same vibe, which probably doesn't seem like a compliment when you say it, because on that show he was horrible, but I always liked his stash, and I think they called him something. Oh God, it's been years, but he was a compelling character on that show. And that was what I thought of when I saw you rocking the early Movember. I've tried to do the Movember over the years. I can't do it. Like maybe like a couple times a year, I'll try and grow out the mustache portion of my beard. I tried it after the Zelda Dungeon Marathon this year, actually, and even today, if you really look, I've got some stubble going on here, but I can never get past the hump. I always shave it after like 2 weeks max.
Right. Yeah, and then kind of in other news, I also did want to kind of bring this non-Metroid thing related up, but earlier this week we lost Sam Rivers, bassist of Limp Bizkit. Absolutely tragic. He was only 48 years old, but
Yeah.
I did go on a bit of a CD shopping spree this week, and in honor of Sam, I thought it was high time to finally add Chocolate Starfish to my CD collection. So that'll be arriving in the mail. We'll be listening to that from start to finish, and we'll pour one out for Sam when we do that.
Yeah. No, the official cause of death wasn't released. There's been inklings that maybe he was battling cancer, and that's horrible if that's true. Sad, man. Like, I actually, so I played a couple Limp Bizkit songs the other night when that broke, and for anyone out there that's looking for kind of maybe a more deep cut Limp Bizkit song, you'll have it on Chocolate Starfish arriving for you there. I thought that this one was kind of an apropos song to play. It's called Hold On, and it features Scott Weiland, who was also unfortunately passed away of Stone Temple Pilots fame, and it's kind of like a different Limp Bizkit song. It's very slow, very somber, very moody, very dark, and I thought it was appropriate, kind of given what what transpired. So that, yeah, you're right, man. That was sad. I love Limp Bizkit, dude. I take no shame in saying that. I thought their last record was great. It's a sad story, and thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, definitely. We both are big Limp Bizkit fans here on the podcast, so I felt like we had to bring that up.
Yeah,
for sure. And again, like even if you're not a Limp Bizkit fan, like at the very least, like such a talented bassist, and I think if you listen to a song like Regenerate, like you can just really just appreciate like the technicality. Like you probably think of like I think most people think of Limp Bizkit as kind of like a meme band or like a slot band or whatever, but no, this like Sam Rivers is like genuinely like a freaking talented bassist, and talent gone too soon from the world.
It's funny because I think if you talked to fans of Limp Bizkit, even like the biggest fan of Limp Bizkit would probably tell you that, like, aside from like arguably Fred Durst, everyone in there is like an amazing musician. Like Wes Borland is amazing. Lethal is an incredible DJ. I'm blanking on the name of the Joel Otto is incredible. Like everyone in there is like a really great musician, and Fred, I think, was kind of the one that people were just like, this guy's kind of a goof. But I would even say that, like, I think Fred Durst is like a great performer and knows what he's good at as well. So A sad bit of news this week, unfortunately for all of the chocolate starfish fans out there. So definitely pour one out for and put on your favorite Limp Bizkit songs. Pour one out this week, man. Well, I'll tell you what, Doom. I came into the show this week in a bad mood for a lot of different reasons. And the first reason being that we had a topic and we are unfortunately going to push it back a week because there is a topic that demands our attention before we can really talk about anything else in the Metroid world, and something that is bigger than video games. Frankly, it should be the biggest story in the Nintendo news world right now, and unfortunately, I just don't think that it is reaching that level. But yeah, that was one of the reasons that I woke up in a bad mood. And the other reason I woke up in a bad mood is, frankly, the contents of our episode today. It's not like something cool happened and we needed to push back our episode to talk about a new trailer or a new something. We're going to be talking about MercurySteam today and all of the allegations and reports that have come out there about just what's been going on at this studio. And I'm actually working on. It's funny because before we did the podcast or recorded today, I had started working on kind of a thought piece about what has transpired, and it was based on the great reporting from Shine Sparkers, which has really done a really good job of kind of like staying on top of these accusations. Our pal Roy, who is basically the chief content officer, creative director of Shine Sparkers, has been really kind of on top of the MercurySteam story. So I really encourage everybody, and we'll link it in the episode description here, those two stories to go and check out from Shine Sparkers. But I mean, not good stories coming out of MercurySteam. Like there were whispers, and maybe not even whispers, maybe it was loud. Like after Metroid Dread came out, that there was maybe some practices that weren't on the up and up. Like there was a lot of people left out of the credits. There was even, I think back then, like rumors of like, hey, people are working overtime. People are not necessarily being compensated the way that they should be. And it certainly seems like that culture has not changed, unfortunately.
In fact, it seems like it's gotten worse if these reports are to be believed. Like, not to bury the lead too much, but this sounds like an awful place to work.
It really does. And we'll go into the reports. We'll kind of detail like what we're hearing, but I mean, like putting aside the human element here for a quick moment, which we'll get into in just a moment, like this is just like another kind of blow for the Metroid series, and it's putting Metroid and fans in a really tough spot, because I mean I think we're all maybe wondering, like, what does this mean for Metroid 6? Like, do we want to support a game like this that has kind of broken the backs of the people that it took to make this game? Do we want to make the CEO of this company richer by virtue of him exploiting a lot of workers here? So it's a horrible position that MercurySteam has put you, the Metroid fan, in, unfortunately, assuming that they are going to be the developer of Metroid 6 or whatever 2D Metroid comes next, which I think is a pretty fair assumption to make. Yeah, just like a really unfortunate story coming out.
Yeah, not really. Again, we'll wait till the actual discussion to where we really delve deep into it. But yeah, just pretty much what you just said. Like this sucks.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's just start, I guess, from the beginning and what we know. So so the initial report, or the initial story that came out here is from October 2nd. At least that's when Shine Sparkers was reporting it. And Doom, you can correct me if I've got anything wrong. And MercurySteam essentially kind of came out and denied that there was any kind of poor working conditions that were going on there. And this is basically what happened is that, according to CSVI CGT, which is a Spanish game developers trade union, the working conditions at MercurySteam were awful. There was several employees, like we're talking 24 employees that were laid off. And then apparently the allegations are that the justification for laying these people off is that there was not enough work. However, the report states that a lot of these people, the developers that were not laid off at MercurySteam, are working 50 hours a week, limited vacation days, random audits of communications between employees. Like no teleworking, so you have to be in office. It sounds like a really awful place to be, and an awful, an awful atmosphere to make a good video game in. And I mean, we won't pretend that MercurySteam is the first video game company to be accused of crunch is what it's typically called in the video game industry, which is crunching to meet a deadline or something along those lines. A lot of the biggest video game developers in the industry have been accused of this. Naughty Dog, for sure, with The Last of Us, and Uncharted 4 was accused of that. EA, I think, has had lawsuits against it previously. Rockstar. So it's certainly not an issue just native to MercurySteam, but it is disappointing because, generally speaking, that's not something that you hear about Nintendo affiliated gaming development companies. And granted, like MercurySteam is in Spain, it is a second party, or not even a second party, but it's not directly under the Nintendo umbrella. But it is unfortunate that these reports are coming out, and yeah, MercurySteam is basically denying all wrongdoing.
And to be fair, we should make ourselves clear. Like, we're not saying that like Nintendo doesn't crunch on their video games. Quite the opposite. I think it's fair to say probably every single video game release out of Nintendo probably has some level of crunch.
Sure.
That being said, at the same time, like, that level of crunch is nowhere near as exasperated as like what you would typically see out of the video game industry. Personally, if we're talking about crunch, I think one of the biggest ones that needs to be brought up is Activision with the Call of Duty games, with the constant yearly releases and the the constant Warzone updates, or Fortnite with its constant updates. Any sort of live service game has
CD Projekt Red was in a world of
unbelievable, grotesque amount of crunch, and that lasts 24/7. Yeah,
we should define something too, because we're kind of on our high horse here. But like, I also think that it's worth saying that, like, when you have a big project and you're kind of getting towards the finish line of that project, I'm not like saying that I'm like totally against like if I'm an employee working on that project and I want to put in some extra time and I feel a little bit of pressure to do that, I don't think that's the worst thing in the world. But there does have to be concessions made, and number one has to be the developer should, I mean, first and foremost, like, the developer should ideally be offering to work over their allotted time if they really are passionate about getting this project done. Number two, the developer should feel like there are no consequences if they don't work extra for getting this done.
Exactly.
And number three, a good manager or a good boss should probably try and talk this person out of working overtime. Now, if all of that is done and all of that is in place, and you have an employee who's really just kind of like, no, this means something to me, I want to put in my best work, like, okay, like I will not sit here and say, like, in my current job, like, sometimes I will work a Saturday or two, and typically it's unpaid, just because, but it's healthy for me to kind of do that. But that's my personal decision, and my boss tries to talk me out of it. So like I'm not like completely against like kind of like dialing in when you're getting to the point in time where it's go time, right? Like you're getting to the deadline time. So I don't want to make it seem like I'm necessarily against that, but like there are all of those conditions. And then like also if you're a manager or a CEO and you're just like, listen guys, like if we can really lock in for this 3-week period, I'm going to make it up to you after the fact. I think that's another conversation as well. And it just seems like none of those 4 criteria that I just mentioned have happened at MercurySteam, because these allegations have been kind of dodging them for many years.
Yeah, absolutely. And this isn't the first time we've talked about, MercurySteam allegations. I don't think we've made a dedicated episode to it, but like it's definitely made the Metroid news cycle before, and we've definitely given our thoughts on it before, especially with some of the frankly gross and dismissive remarks that the director has made in response. I remember one in particular. I can't remember. I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but he basically dismissed accusations of crunch by basically saying, "Well, Metroid Dread was a 3 million success, so therefore it wasn't. There was no crunch." And it's like that is literally irrelevant and has nothing to do with any of
Yeah.
anything that has been said. That's just like that is absolutely insane that you thought you could just say that and get away with that.
Yeah, it's really tough. So I'm going to read a little bit more from the report. So according to CSVI CGT, the studio's first game after Metroid Dread, which was a kind of like Souls-looking game called Blades of Fire, did not meet the sales expectations of its publisher, and MercurySteam laid off 24 employees, which, as we said, they blamed on not enough work. And then they basically refuted the idea that there's any sort of crunch, and then multiple employees, I guess, went to the Hobby Consolas magazine and put out their own statement saying that like this is not true, like this is totally false. Now this is where it gets a little bit dicey because this is all in Spanish, and I am no I am not very good at reading Spanish, nor do I think that I should put in the article in Google Translate. But essentially, like that link to that article was removed, but it has been preserved on another Spanish site called 3D Jugos, I think is how you say it. And essentially, what the
let me I have to cut you off.
I have no idea. How tell me
3D
how.
3D juegos.
Wait,
Sorry,
dude,
hurt. That physically hurt me. Sorry.
I'm a Canadian. Okay, I don't know. I try my best. So Hugos, is that what we're saying?
Juegos.
Okay.
Yeah.
People are rioting listening to this. Anyways, so a 3D Juegos. The group of employees denies that teleworking was eliminated. Communication is restricted, to that MercurySteam is under a systematic crunch. Additionally, claiming that there is a positive work environment with flexible hours, 10 days vacation during the holiday season, and 23 remote work days per year. So, I mean, I think generally speaking, I tend to believe the developers rather than the company that kind of puts out the happy everything is fine kind of statement here, but that wasn't all. So on the 18th of October, 2 weeks after the initial report, when Shine Sparkers has reported on the accusations from the Spanish Union, a new report from 3D, oh my god, what Juegos. I'm just gonna say the 3D site here. My God. So it expands upon these accusations. They spoke with 10 current and former employees who allege that working conditions deteriorating beginning in January of 2025. So I'm gonna read a lot of this verbatim because it's pretty shocking stuff. According to the employees, MercurySteam implemented the Irregular Workday Distribution (IDD) model for some departments at the start of 2025. This model allows for a single hour of overtime per day, or 9-hour work days and 45-hour work weeks due to production needs. That right away feels like super greasy to me. I work in corporate, I work in a corporate world, and that would not fly. I will just say that right now. On May 5th, MercurySteam announced that, along with temporary layoffs, some departments would have employees now working 10 hours per day, 50 hours per week, with a temporary ban on remote working and vacations. The employees claimed that this change was communicated verbally and not in writing, and when they brought their concerns to management in a later meeting, they admitted those overtime hours were in fact voluntary. Nevertheless, the employee who spoke to 3D said that MercurySteam put measures in place to intimidate workers into working overtime, and some departments were unaffected. So kind of goes to point number 2 that I think I brought up earlier, where like you can say no to working overtime, but you know that you're going to be in trouble for it, which is just like such a a horrible feeling, because like what are you as a person, as a developer, like you're pretty helpless in that position. Like you are damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Right. Yeah, yeah, it's coercion. That's basically what that is.
Yeah.
Like it's not a direct threat, but it's an implicit threat of retaliation. If you do if you decide to actually actually express your labor rights.
Hmm.
And there's definitely, and again, definitely so many issues and stories of this throughout the video game industry. But again, it's just really it's really sad to see it in this context, especially with a team that put out two absolutely phenomenal games that we as Metroid fans adore.
And we'll get back to
And
that
also
in
one
a
other
minute.
thing,
Yeah.
and one other thing I did want to shout out regarding 3D Juegos. It's actually really interesting because we don't really see this kind of relationship with video game media publishers, or at least magazine publishers in the United States very often.
Hmm.
But this magazine has actually like featured cover stories of both Metroid Samus Returns and Metroid Dread. So they actually had like a working professional relationship, and maybe even still do. I would imagine it's a little bit rocky after this with MercurySteam. And
Right.
yet in spite of it, they still allowed these developers to come on and basically air their grievances and tell that kind of story, which even for I think some of the more ethical publishers in the video games media in North America, that isn't really a thing you see. If there's some sort of professional relationship with a developer, you might hear them report on a story allegedly, but you wouldn't hear them actually bring on those colleagues anonymously and like directly make a brand new story where you're breaking the news directly from them. That isn't really a thing that happens here. And so I do have to give a shout out to 3D Juegos and Hobby Consolas for
Yeah.
doing that, despite the fact that that probably put a fracture in their relationship with MercurySteam.
Let's come back to that in a quick sec, because I do want to talk about how games are generally covered here. Yeah, so let's continue here. Um, in a shocking example, one probationary employee claimed that he was fired after declining to work overtime so he could take paternity leave to support his wife during her high-risk pregnancy. Another employee who was vocal in their opposition to these new working conditions was fired, and a third claimed she was fired upon returning from sick leave. The employee claimed that her department had persistently texted her personal phone during said sick leave. On her return, she was denied access to critical systems, not assigned tasks, and then fired a month later for underperformance. She told 3D that MercurySteam threatened her with legal action for speaking about this on social media. Not a very good look. So keeping up here, the 18 workers who were laid off, as we all know, basically confirmed everything in the report that 3D put out, and then they confirmed or reaffirmed everything in the statement from CSVI as true, and refuted the response that came from MercurySteam, suggesting they would know if their former colleagues had spoken in the company's defense. They additionally pointed out that despite the crunch they allegedly experienced at MercurySteam, job postings for the studios claim that there is no culture of crunch. So some pretty damning allegations, to say the least, against MercurySteam here. And it does bear, it's worth bringing up that back in 2021, when Metroid Dread came out, there was the controversy of people not being credited for the game, and MercurySteam did give Shinesparkers a statement back then, and I'll read it now. We accredit all those who stay with us a minimum time in the particular project, usually the vast majority of them. We set the minimum at 25% of dev time. We also credit those who, even though they have not been in the project for too long, had significant creative contributions. A game development is a complex, hard, exhausting endeavor. We understand any of us need to contribute at a minimum to it to be accredited in the final product. And they would go on to say, they're just responding to clarify what they mean by significant creative contributions and why a minimum of 25% is chosen. And this is what MercurySteam added on. A significant contribution might mean a lot of things, from designing a playable character, writing dialogue, lore, anything substantially important to the game. On the 25%, this is something based on our experience. Of course, it can be seen differently elsewhere. So, I mean, like you could argue that that 25% is kind of an arbitrary number, or what defines a significant contribution. I would like to. I'd be curious how many other companies do have kind of a similar, I guess, like framework in place to credit their employees or not credit their employees. I mean, to their defense, I guess I will say, if someone does work on a project for 2 weeks and moves on, is that person worth crediting? And I guess the answer is probably, if they worked on the project for a little bit of time. But like, maybe in the eyes of some, maybe not. I don't know. Maybe that's a different line for most people. But I think in like the grand scheme of things, you err on the side of like just credit the person. Like, I mean, honestly, like the credits are there for the people that worked on the game. Like, you're typically not sticking around and watching the credits in a video game. So like, what's the harm in adding that? So, or at least under the like special thanks or something like that. I don't know what that answer is, but it's the point is, it's like, it's certainly not the first time that there's been some controversy around this studio, and MercurySteam did kind of commit to cleaning up their act a little bit, and obviously that did not happen. Allegedly.
Yeah. And I remember when this first broke out, and none of us were really happy about it. At least in that sense. And again, I'm not excusing that at all. I think it's definitely a little scummy even then.
Yeah.
But at least in that sense, you could argue that, like, this is something that was preemptively laid out in the contract that you signed before you got the job. This is something you already knew going into the company, that like, hey, you need to work on it on this amount of time. Yeah. Is it still unfair, especially if you aren't able to leave of your own accord, and it's like, no, but I really wanted to, like, be a part of this experience? Yeah, I think that's still pretty scummy and definitely unfair. But again, at least that's like laid out in advance. Obviously, none of these accusations, as well as a lot of the accusations that were laid out afterward, are obviously not part of the contract, and definitely like way more unethical for a variety of obvious reasons.
Yeah, which is unfortunate. Like, that you would hope that. I mean, you would hope that the any kind of game development studio would do right by its employees, because I mean, like, that really is like the ultimate, like, without them you're nothing, right? Like, so it's disappointing to hear about. But I do want to go back to your comment about like how that magazine kind of worked in tandem with MercurySteam, because I'd be honest with you, like, I think that's what's as disappointing is if you go to Google right now and you Google MercurySteam, do you know what comes up? Almost nothing.
Probably like an ad for Metroid Dread on the eShop or something, I would imagine.
The Shinesparkers article comes up. There's an article from GameDeveloper.com reporting the accusations, but like, there is not a word from any major outlet. And maybe it's because MercurySteam is a smaller studio, but I mean, this is a studio affiliated with Nintendo that is releasing Nintendo games, that has just released a fairly, maybe not a high profile game, but at least a game that came out on multiple different platforms. And your IGNs, your GameSpots, your Kotakus, your games media are not covering this, which is disappointing. And someone could fact check me if I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just missing the article. Maybe it doesn't come up. But I mean, I'm in the news section of Google, and there's nothing. Like, there's not a single thing that is being reported about this, which kind of brings into it kind of brings into just sharp focus that, like, unfortunately, there is no advocate for this kind of stuff beyond like a Jason Schreier, who is almost like a one-man army when it comes to reporting on some of the cultural difficulties that this industry faces. And that's disappointing, because like those big outlets like your IGNs and your GameSpots and your Jeff Keighley's should have an obligation to come out and say this is wrong. And I very vividly remember when Jeff Keighley awarded The Last of Us 2 Game of the Year after reports of huge crunch came out for that game. I just like it's really crappy that this kind of culture exists in the gaming space where you can have allegedly, again, it's important to remember that this is one side of the story. But allegedly you can have conditions like this and no one there really to advocate for you other than a single journalist in North America, right?
Yeah, I do think that like the scale of MercurySteam is a big reason why this hasn't gone more viral, because there have been other viral instances. Like there was a big one on the crunch of like Red Dead Redemption 2 with Rockstar, and allegedly some developers have reported better working conditions since then. I can't imagine it's too great with GTA 6 right now, but there's nothing's been reported on that, so I don't want to put anything in the air. Obviously there was a massive expose with Activision, which ultimately led to the Microsoft buyout.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of other but the difference is those are like, very big studios, very big mainstream, blockbuster studios in the industry. And unfortunately, MercurySteam isn't that. And because of that, like you said, yeah, there isn't really anyone that wants to advocate it, because at least, when you're reporting on, a big Rockstar scandal, that's going to generate headlines, which generates revenue. MercurySteam, your average gamer doesn't know what MercurySteam is. They're a niche Spanish publisher that's known for publishing a really good video game and a niche video game series. And so again, it's not to say that there's no one out there speaking. And, obviously there's been other instances in the past where some of these have been a little bit more reported. But yeah, I think because of its stature, there isn't that incentive, there isn't that financial incentive structure for other outlets to report on that, which is unfortunate. That really is the incentive nature, is pure finance and not just a desire to cover it.
Yeah, I mean it's unfortunate, and listen, these are allegations. It's pretty. I will say this, like it's pretty easy for me to believe these allegations based on previous culture and previous stories that we've heard in the video game industry. So like I don't think it's a far stretch of the imagination to say like there's probably some validity to these allegations. Maybe the truth lies somewhere in the middle, but yeah, it's a really unfortunate story that deserves more coverage than it's getting. And just, I don't know what the answer is. And I guess that we should transition over next to like, what does this mean for Metroid 6? Like what does this mean for this game and you as a consumer, and what you kind of choose to do? And I guess like, the first thing that that probably comes to mind for me is like, unfortunately, I think the vast majority of people, this isn't going to be a big deal when we see, the next Metroid title, assuming that MercurySteam is still the developer of this Metroid title. But I mean, for people that don't want to support this, but want to support Metroid, like, this is a really difficult position to be in, because, it's not like we're talking about Pokemon or Call of Duty here, where like you can boycott the game and maybe the execs say like, oh, these are softer sales than usual, and the next one is we're going to implement some changes so this doesn't happen again. Like Metroid kind of exists on that precipice where it's like one game, it almost feels like that bombs could lead to like another 8-year gap in between titles, and it's just like it stings extra hard because like It really took a long time for 2D Metroid to find some sense of stability, and MercurySteam brought that in 2017 and 2021, and like I mean, we forget like there was like a 13-year gap between 2D Metroid games. So, like finding the right partner was not a quick or easy process, and now kind of like with the thought of potentially having to do it all again, it's a daunting thought, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of reminds me a lot about, Metroid Prime 1, because Metroid Prime 1 is also another game that infamously had, a ton of crunch, leading up to the finish line. Yeah. The difference there is that eventually Nintendo purchased Retro Studio, and they kind of just, reforged a lot of the upper management of that. Now Michael Kelbaugh runs the studio. And allegedly, from interviews from former staff there, it seems like the development of Prime 2 went a lot smoother than Prime 1. Obviously, again, there was still a big crunch at the end, like most other games, but it was nowhere near as devastating as the nearly year-long crunch that went on during Metroid Prime 1, where people were literally working 80 hours a week and just sleeping in at the studio. And so and I think that leads, the next big question is, should Nintendo buy MercurySteam? And maybe 10 years ago I would have said a resounding yes, but in today's gaming climate, I'm not so sure about that anymore, because oh boy, as we've seen a lot of devastating consequences today with a lot of the big conglomerations. And granted, like, obviously Nintendo, they operate very differently. They look at game studios a lot differently than Sony and especially Microsoft does. But, and granted, we haven't really, as of right now, seen any evidence of like huge studio mishandling under Nintendo. Like, Next Level Games still seems to be operating great. God, I can't remember. Monolith Soft, that's who I was thinking of. Monolith Soft has become like a hugely influential part
Top tier developer
of Nintendo. Yeah, I would argue like the Nintendo of today doesn't, games as we know them today from Nintendo does not exist without Monolith Soft. They are an essential part of the Nintendo machine. And so, maybe them purchasing MercurySteam would be for the best, but at the same time, that's also under the current leadership, and that could easily change under it's a complex situation.
Yeah. Really. Well, and that's the thing. Like, if you're Nintendo, you kind of have to decide, like, because we've talked to, like, before, like, should they buy MercurySteam? Because I think, like, if you really believe that developer is the one for Metroid, it's probably a low investment, relatively speaking, for Nintendo. But, like, now we have to ask, like, well, are the talent we want, are they still there? Are they still engaged? Are they still motivated? And I think if you're Nintendo, it's considering buying MercurySteam, I actually, like, I kind of took the latter path. Like, if I was Nintendo, I would seriously look at it, but replace the leadership. I think that has to be, like, a consideration. Or else it's like you're looking for a different partner. Or there's a third option, which, again, is probably maybe the most obvious option, but just not the popular one, that is Nintendo just we wait a little bit for these allegations to go away, and we get the next Metroid game, and it's probably gonna be really good, because say what you will about MercurySteam, but they make good games, except for Blades of Fire, which was critically trashed, probably because everyone was bagged and working 50 hours a week, but allegedly. But so, like, if you're, I don't know, if you're Nintendo, I just think, like, you either buy the studio, replace the management, or you look for a different partner. I guess the third option is you just wait for it to go away, and hopefully the next time that there's crunch, it just doesn't get reported. And I think that's unfortunately the easy answer for, like, a lot of companies. And I would hope that Nintendo wouldn't do that, because, I mean, say what you will about them, and you can say a lot, but generally speaking, like, they have a pretty good precedent with how they treat their staff. You cited Retro Studios as an example. Like, they came in and they cleaned house for Retro, and by all accounts, Retro's been running great for the last 20 years. But I don't know what the answer is. I know that for me as a Metroid fan now, like, I'm a little bit iffy about supporting MercurySteam games, especially if we hear rumblings when the next Metroid game comes out that, like, there's all these people that are being worked to death and not credited. And I think that's not, like, an insignificant thing. I think that's going to turn off some people, and it's just, like, a really, like, MercurySteam leadership has put Metroid fans, the Metroid series, Nintendo, and in just, like, a really bad spot. And that's not even talking about the human element of their staff, who can't get days off when their wife is pregnant, or they're sick, or, you know what, or allegedly, again, allegedly, but it's a tough story to stomach.
Yeah, I probably will still buy Metroid 6 regardless. I might not feel great about doing it, but I still will. I've heard a lot of Alana Pierce, I can't remember if it was like a year or two ago. She's a content creator, former journalist at IGN, but and also formerly at Santa Monica Studios, but
Also formerly of Zelda
she had a really
Universe of all places.
yeah. But she had a really good talk with a lot of former game developers who have experienced like intense crunch and about boycotting video games and whether or not it was the right decision. And pretty much all of them came to the unanimous conclusion that like a massive boycott is pretty much impossible for any game, and most of them it's like there are more effective actions to take as a consumer, but by and large, even if obviously this is a small sample size, you can't speak for the literal thousands if not hundreds of thousands of game developers out there with incredibly diverse opinions, but from that sample size that she was talking with, the unanimous kind of takeaway was, hey, if don't let the way the company treated us impact you as a consumer. If you want to play this game, please enjoy the game, enjoy the work that we put into this. But there's other ways that that you can support us and make your voice heard. And so
Totally.
for me
Yeah.
that was a little, yeah, and so for me at least that's a little bit more reassuring, because I do want to play these fantastic games. I do want to like give praise to the developers, whether or not they did like whether they're responsible for a major mechanic like the slide or the flash shift, or even something subtle like Samus putting her hand up when she's against a wall. I want to like shout out all the developers that put so much time and attention to all these tiny details that I adore in their games. But at the same time, yeah, I think it's important as consumers that we can enjoy this work and still be incredibly critical of how this work was forged together.
Yeah, and I mean, like, and I'm not saying that anybody should boycott the next Metroid game. There's a lot of time, like a lot of stuff can change before the next Metroid game comes out. But even if nothing changes, I'm not saying that like people need to boycott it. But I mean, it just sucks that like you're in a position where you have to think about like what do I want to do with this game? How do I want to support it without supporting the developers? And it's just like a really bad spot, I think, for this developer to put its employees in, to put the fans of the games that they make in. And yeah, I mean, it's a story that will continue to follow. I don't imagine that there's going to be any more kind of like press releases or statements from MercurySteam unless some of the bigger outlets really start to hold their feet to the fire, which I don't know. I guess I'm not holding my breath. I'll tell you this: leadership at MercurySteam, you have an open invitation to come on the Omega Metroid podcast and discuss your work culture there, because I have many questions for you. And maybe I'll try and reach out and make that happen. I don't know. I'm sure they'd say no, but hey.
I don't want to say it's all doom and gloom, because I think it's important to remember these original accusations were levied by that Spanish union, and so it's not like they're hopeless or out of the corner. Like these accusations and these MercurySteam employees, they are working with a Spanish gaming union right now. That's a pretty big organization to have in your corner, and so I actually wouldn't even be surprised if if there was a lawsuit or a settlement over this. But yeah, my I hope nothing for the best for these, not just these former employees, but for the current employees,
the current ones, especially the current ones, yeah, and future employees as well, because like we want MercurySteam to keep making great games, but we also want them to make better decisions and have better practices and better policies. So yeah, it's a story that we'll continue to follow. Again, Shine Sparkers has done some really great reporting. There's a couple other outlets out there as well who have been following the story. So make sure that you are checking them out, and we'll update it as it as more information becomes available. But I mean, certainly not the kind of story that you want to spend most of your Metroid podcast talking about when we're a couple weeks away from Metroid Prime 4, and we got all this great content to talk about and whatnot. So a disappointing story to follow, but I guess we'll leave it there for now and follow up on these allegations after more information becomes available.
Absolutely. Yeah. There was a one other thing though that I really wanted to talk about today.
Yes.
And
Speaking of things that are putting
yeah,
us in a bad mood.
which unlike the MercurySteam news, which hasn't really broken out, there's another piece of news which, on the contrary, has gone quite viral, and I think for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
And we got to talk about the Miyamoto quote. So there was, and I should have pulled up the tweet because
I've got it here. Let me find it.
Thank you.
Goo sent it to me like immediately as soon as it was posted. So the original quote that was I don't know who was the first person to tweet this, but Stealth 40K was the first person I saw to really kind of float it out there. So I don't want to say that Stealth is spreading this misinformation. I'm sure he probably got it from somewhere else. But anyways, the quote is, Miyamoto explained why Nintendo was made a serious push into making movies. Games eventually stop running when newer versions come out, but films remain forever.
Yeah, and this was from I want to say the original publisher was like Tokyo Business or something like that. I probably don't have the title quite right, but if my memory, it was Tokyo something was the original.
I've got the full
publisher of
quote
the
here
article.
as well. So
Yeah.
first of all, before we read that, I do want to say, like, I can 100% understand why people were up in arms about this tweet. I was up in arms. I was
Yes.
just like, that is insane. Like, first and foremost, there's nothing wrong with just saying we wanted to get into movies because we have great IP and we can make a lot of money. There's nothing wrong with that. Like,
Yeah.
just say it. You don't have to give us some fakakta answer about, like, films
Right.
are forever, because films are not forever. We had a big talk about this in the Discord, and, like, I think I could generally agree that preserving films is easier than preserving video games, but it's not. That doesn't make it easy. Like, there are lots of films that are impossible to find new or rent, including the Super Mario Bros. 1993 movie. You can buy it on Amazon, some used copies, and I think like a 4K release came out like a year or two ago. But like for 30 years, you couldn't find this thing anywhere. You could rent it,
And
you
even
could buy it. Like,
and even so, a lot of movies are like re-edited and reformatted. It's difficult,
Yes.
to find the original versions. Big
Star
example
Wars,
being,
Blade Runner.
Yeah, the Star. That's like the big one that everyone brings up.
Yeah.
I would argue also a lot of the James Cameron re-releases, with a lot of the AI upscaling, have looked pretty
Oh,
disgusting.
yeah.
And so I definitely prefer a lot of those. God, look.
so like, films are not
4K release
forever.
of True Lies is yeah.
Like, your
Yeah, it's
film is only
abomination,
as
but,
reliable as like the current streaming service that you can get it on. Which, anyways, so that in and of itself is like a terrible quote. But a couple hours later, I'm gonna read the quote that I have here. I don't know who originally tweeted it out. Maybe this was the original tweet, but
that's the key word, and I'll elaborate once you're finished.
yeah. So there was a user on Blue Sky, Irasu at Blue Sky Social, and they basically said, like, this is just legitimate rage bait. The context was specifically about expanding the Nintendo IPs and the Nintendo Museum, where they can see and use old hardware. Here's the question and the answer. So the question and answer was, with the expansion of areas like Universal Studios, Japan's Donkey Kong Country, and the growing number of people experiencing Nintendo IP, I believe the Nintendo Museum is an extremely effective way to engage 3 generations of families. What kind of corporate vision are you aiming for as you expand your IP going forward? Miyamoto. We have character-themed exhibits along the walls on the second floor, and we feature characters in the welcome zone at the entrance to the museum on the first floor. Initially, this museum was primarily designed around showcasing past products and hardware, but to help people understand Nintendo as a whole, we decided showing them the IPs was the best approach, so we created this space. Now we're operating it as a gateway to introduce these IPs and bring people back to Nintendo games, much like IPs, theme parks, and movies do. Looking ahead, while games are obviously part of the larger Nintendo IP brand, we envision creating even more compelling things. We hope to think of it as a space where all sorts of things can be incorporated. And here is the money. Ultimately, what people remember are the IPs. Games become obsolete when new versions come out, but that's incredibly sad. We started video game production partly because of that sadness, seeing our creations become playable only on Virtual Console. Even making them playable in a museum has its limits, but video game content can endure forever. I envision more and more of these things accumulating, making Nintendo itself a huge brand. I always say our theme is creating reasons for people to choose Nintendo. I dream of a world where, when a child enters first grade, the conversation isn't, what game should we buy, but rather, when you start first grade, we'll get you a Nintendo. That would work on me. That would have been, if my parents would have said, like, listen, if you can make it to first grade, I'll buy you an SNES. I'd be like, yep, you got it. Instead, they just made me go.
Yeah, I know. That's not
bogus.
Fair. Yeah, I remember the GameCube came out like when I was in like first or second grade, and I would have been super excited to go to school. Like, yo, I'm getting a GameCube. Dude. Let's go. And then instead I had to buy it with my own chore money.
I think I was like, I don't know, 10 or 11 when the GameCube came out, and I was begging my parents for Christmas for a GameCube, like every day, all day. It was like a 6-month campaign, and eventually, just to shut me up, they were just like, "Here's your goddamn GameCube," and I was like, "Great, but you didn't give me a memory card, so I just unlocked Mewtwo, and now I have to do it again." Anyways,
Mewtwo over and over. Yeah, I feel like as kids we were all there before we got our memory card, where we were just playing the opening intro of a game over and over again.
Yeah. So a wildly misconstrued quote.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things. As you just said, wildly taken out of context quote there. And I do want to give Stealth some props as well, because he did retract his initial post and made an apology as well for that. So I do want to give Stealth some props for that. For,
totally.
Holding him for holding himself accountable for that. So there's a couple of things there. One, insanely taken out of context, but two, as you mentioned, as of the time of recording, and granted this could change, there is no publisher associated with the original article. The article is just posted on there, which is very odd for, what is essentially a direct interview. And that has gone to a lot of speculation that this is an AI-generated article. Obviously, we don't know if that's true or not. It could be AI-generated, could not be AI-generated, or perhaps the interview actually happened and then it was formatted through an AI to create the final article. We really don't know right now, but at the very end of the day, it's all led to what is an obvious piece of misinformation that has completely gone viral and has taken the video game community, not just the Nintendo community, but the video game community by storm. And while some people are starting to finally come to their senses, because I was also, when I first saw that, I was also it got me. I was raging too. I was like, what? This is ridiculous.
It's just like a horrible take.
Only Nintendo could say something this insane. And then of course, once I calmed down and I started looking more into it, and it's like, oh, okay, this actually isn't that bad. But the vast majority of people that read that are either not going to have the forethought to look into that, or just frankly don't want to, because they already have a bias against Nintendo, and this just confirms that bias. And again, we are not defending Nintendo. We literally just opened up this article heavily criticizing a developer of some of our favorite Nintendo games. So by all means, we are not here to defend Nintendo, but I think this is really relevant, especially right now, in regards to Metroid Prime 4 in particular, because I've noticed something that's happened recently, and I think you and a lot of our other viewers have noticed this too. And it all started with the Switch 2, specifically the big reveal in April, not the initial reveal in January. During the Switch 2 presentation, we were all hyped as hell. We all came out of that presentation like, that is one of the best Nintendo presentations we've ever seen. That was incredible. We are hyped as hell. We are going strong into Switch 2. And then literally minutes right after the presentation is when all the downer news started coming. And a lot of that downer news was accurate. We found out the cost of the console. We found out the cost of Mario Kart World and a lot of that. The cost of the controllers and some of the accessories. Yada, yada. But along with that, there was quite a bit of misinformation. And you can go back to the episode that we did where we're doing
it's
our
coming in left
talk.
And right. Like,
yeah,
and we're trying to keep up with it.
We're reading the comments like as they're coming out, and there's like all sorts of like different takes and contradictions, and we're trying to wondering like, wait a minute, is this accurate in some territories and not other? And it was just all over the place. And what I think one of the big pieces of misinformation that was heavily propagated is Mario Kart World is $90, which was at least presented. It was at least presented in North American dollars to be the case. That is obviously not true. And even the $80 claim, that's if you buy the game standalone. If you buy the bundle, you can get it for $50. But yeah, that's one of the big claims, and that's something even today that, while not as heavily circulated, is still something, a talking point that I will see thrown out, fairly frequently from, a lot of people that are very anti-Nintendo. Is like, I will not support a company that releases a base game for $90. And it's like, that never happened. That is not a thing that exists. And again, we're talking North America. Obviously, different territories where, the dollar value starts at a different tier is going to be different. But for North America, that is not a thing that exists. And I noticed as soon as that presentation ended, where like all of this information started swirling, it never really went away. And there's been an algorithmic incentive to to produce negative Nintendo content since then. And again, I'm not trying to bootlick Nintendo here. Again, we were just criticizing, one of Nintendo's trusted developers they've been working with. We've been incredibly critical of a lot of stuff on Nintendo in this podcast. We've been very vocal in a lot of things, and rightly so. There's a lot of stuff that you can criticize the billion-dollar corporation for. They are not your friends. They are trying to make a profit. We are well aware of that. I think it's also important, though, to source those criticisms in accuracy, which a lot of this misinformation is not. It's, which again, not anything really new. Rage bait is nothing new on the internet, but it substantially escalated ever since that Switch 2 presentation, and very quickly so, literally within minutes after that presentation ending, once Nintendo started posting, a lot of that pricing stuff. And this is where it all relates to Metroid Prime 4, because obviously, and we were again talking about the marketing today in the Discord server, but especially after that third trailer, there's been a lot of back and forth in the community on whether or not Metroid Prime 4's marketing is good. And frankly, I don't really have anything to contribute to that. I think that's a conversation that we can't really have until the games come out and we've really, seen what, those initial launch sales look like. I think only then can we really have a conversation about how effective the marketing has been. Right now, I don't really have much to say other than and I know you are personally.
I cannot talk about the marketing for Metroid Prime 4 one more time. There has been trailers and demos, and I don't know what else.
And I don't. And I want to be very clear. Here's what I'm not saying. I am not dismissing anyone's critiques of Metroid Prime 4 right now. I want to make that very clear. If you're someone who's watching this episode, maybe you hated the new trailer. Maybe the bike is like, antithetical to what you play Metroid for, and you didn't like what you saw. That's a valid criticism. That's totally fine. I am not attacking you if that is your opinion. It's not mine, but you know what? Hey, we all have opinions. That's totally fine. Mm-hmm. What I am saying though is, a lot of the veracity of these claims, a lot of the exaggerations of some of these claims, I think are absolutely being propagated as part of this, algorithmic incentive to post negative Nintendo content, because Metroid Prime 4 isn't, obviously it's a big Nintendo project. And I think that's absolutely a part of why this discussion has been propagated so much. And again, if that's your personal opinion, not calling you out specifically, you're allowed to have that opinion. But I think it's a lot more overblown than it truly is. And I think this incentive is a huge reason why. And I want to talk about the initial reveal trailer, not the one in 2017, but the one last year, the gameplay reveal from last year, because I don't know if any of you folks remember, but when that trailer came out, I did not like that trailer. And I was very vocal in the Discord about why I didn't like that trailer. And I felt pretty alone. Everyone was incredibly hyped for that trailer. My Twitter, my Blue Sky feeds were like off the chart, like, oh my God, Prime 4 is real. It looks incredible. Oh my God, could this be Switch 2? I don't know. And like it was incredibly positive. And eventually I warmed up on that trailer. It took me a couple weeks, but I eventually warmed up on it. But my initial out of the gate reaction is like, man, that sucked. I did not like what I saw. You fast forward to today, however, and a lot of those exact same vocal fans who were praising that trailer are now going back and calling that trailer weak. It's like, oh, they didn't show any new gameplay. Looks like a GameCube title, and from the exact same people. And I've seen that kind of, and again, this obviously isn't everyone. I'm not accusing everyone of this, but I've noticed the general conversation shift around that reveal trailer alone, let alone the whole Metroid Prime 4 marketing campaign. And it's really interesting seeing that as someone who definitely does remember not being impressed with that first trailer, being kind of like one of the sole people in a sea of people who were excited, and now kind of watching our opinions swap almost, where it's like, now, and took me a few weeks, but I eventually did warm up and really enjoy the trailer. And now a lot of the people who did, don't really seem to enjoy that as much. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today, because a lot of people are understandably scared about Metroid Prime 4. They feel like a lot is riding on this game. It's a game that, we've all been waiting, minimum 8 years, more if, you freshly played Prime 3 in 2007 for, and, you want this game to be perfect. You want it to revitalize Metroid and lead to a brand new, golden era where, our favorite game series finally gets the recognition it deserves. And I think a lot of this anti-Nintendo algorithm is like driving people mad, and I think everyone just needs to calm down and chill out. If you look at Prime 4's pre-order numbers right now, and granted, this is just on Amazon US, it's doing very high on pre-orders. People are very excited for this game. If you look at actual data and metrics, again, not to dismiss people's criticisms online, this game is going to be just fine. And again, just remember, it's an algorithm. It is an algorithm that is designed for clicks, and it's used negativity in this case to do so. And I think there's a lot of evidence pointing towards that. Anyways, I've been on my high horse for what feels like 10
jump in
minutes
here
now.
and say, like,
so yeah, feel free to jump in.
Negative news gets clicks, and that's in the video game industry, and that is especially true in the political world. You wonder why you have people cutting these awful divisive promos on outlets at late night cable news. That's why, because like people engage with that rage bait stuff. Like even going back to the marketing, like, I kind of took umbrage with a former colleague of ours saying, like, Nintendo, here's your chance. You better get the marketing right, and people's livelihoods are on the line, and it's sucked so far. And it's like, according to who? Who says it sucks? Now you can say, like, you haven't been blown away by the trailers. That's fine, but like there have been 3 trailers in big Nintendo Directs. There's been a very extended like treehouse demonstration of this on Switch 2. It's getting the dual release to reach a maximum audience. It's got ads everywhere on YouTube. Famously in train stations, it says it's out right now. Like it toured the country with a demo. I would be surprised if it didn't have a demo coming out closer to release date. Like I just like I don't know, like what makes good marketing? Is it like the one story trailer that really turns it around? Maybe it is for some people, and maybe that's what you're thinking, but I don't know. I just think that like it's so easy to make a YouTube video with your mouth open and it's on your thumbnail being like, why is Metroid Prime 4's marketing so terrible? And it's like, is it? Like is it terrible? Is that what we're thinking? And you know what? You could have great marketing and still have a crappy selling game. And you could have no marketing and have an amazing selling game. Like there is so many other factors. Like even if Metroid Prime 4 doesn't, quote unquote meet expectations, whatever those are, because none of us know, right? Like I think it's fair to assume that expectations should be higher due to the restart of Metroid Prime 4's development. But like, Yeah, I don't know. I've been talking about marketing leading up to Metroid Prime 4 way more than I feel like we've been talking about the stuff that's in the game, the open areas, the bike, the side quests that presumably live in there. And listen, if the game comes out and it sucks, like we'll be the first ones to say it. And I think that's going to be the overall barometer of like if the game is going to be successful or not. Because like for the game to be successful, it has to be awesome. Like that's kind of the secret formula here, which really isn't really so secret. But I mean, what's definitely not a secret is like negative content is easy to get engagement for because you're going to get people that either agree or you're going to get people that are trying to defend. And you know, a lot of people that make these videos or whatever don't care if what your arguments or not. Right. They just want your engagement.
And that's been true since like, you know, not even the start of the internet, but like the start of like media in general. Like, you know, negative content, controversial content gets clicks. But I especially feel like it's gotten really bad in terms of Nintendo news following that Switch 2 presentation in April. Like I've definitely noticed a dramatic shift on the way Nintendo news is covered and the amount of misinformation is spread post and before that Switch 2 presentation. And I feel like that's hit the Prime 4 discussion as well. And so that's just kind of something that I wanted to talk about because I feel I've really noticed that change happen in real time, it feels like.
Yeah, I mean, maybe to me, I just feel like it's always been there. You know, I've been reporting on Zelda news for God, almost 10 years now. So like, I feel like maybe I'm just like used to it, and I've talked about this before. Like, I kind of do think that like in a lot of ways, Metroid, and this isn't intended to be like a critique, but like I think Metroid fans are sometimes understandably fragile in the way that that they, I guess, just conduct themselves, because like you've had so many instances where Nintendo's taken these games away from you for 8+ years. So like I'm not saying that it's not unwarranted, but I do think that there is a tendency to potentially be oversensitive to these types of things, and you know, people making videos know that. So yeah, and you know what, like these shows like where we talk about awful video practices and negativity farming and rage baiting and awful working conditions at MercurySteam, like they're not really fun episodes to record. Like we'd like to be talking about what we think some of the next open areas are going to be, or what, like, you know what I mean? Like we're a month away from Metroid Prime 4, so like we should be really amping up here for some exciting times ahead.
Yeah, we have that ARC book coming out in about a week, and
that's right.
I would be shocked if we didn't. Yeah, which I definitely want to do an episode on that if there's enough content to warrant that. So
yeah, but I mean, at the same time, like it is our obligation, I feel like, to discuss some of these very important things that affect human lives, that just affect like how we as fans are going to be interacting with Metroid 6, Metroid Prime 4. So yeah, just a different type of episode, but I thought that they were important points to try and bring up today here, regardless, because like this is ultimately the stuff that matters, you know, like the people that make these games for us, like their stories are really the ones that matter. So yeah, we'll continue to track the MercurySteam story. Don't believe all the bad negativity that you hear from people on the internet about the marketing or about whatever for Metroid Prime 4. If the trailers that have come out yet haven't blown you away, that's fine. There's still a lot of time for that one great trailer to come, and maybe that just fixes everything for a lot of people. And I don't even mean that facetiously. Maybe it does. But yeah, I think that it's not all doom and gloom in the Metroid Prime 4 front, and I do hope for the best for employees past, present, and future of MercurySteam. Hopefully they can clean up their act, and yeah, I mean, I hope that it works out, because like I would love to support MercurySteam in the future, but you do kind of feel weird about it, at least right now, based on the allegations that we've heard. I do want to end the episode with some good news here, Doom. The soundtrack for Metroid 2 has made its way to the Nintendo Music app.
Let's go. About time. Did that just break?
Yeah, I don't know if it did or not. It was maybe earlier today, but I'm just seeing it right now. You know what? You can't say it's a big soundtrack, but my God, it's a good soundtrack, isn't it?
I'm waiting for you to say the word so I can disagree with that.
Well, I mean, they don't just put any old soundtrack on Nintendo Music, okay? You gotta have a level of iconicity to get on there.
You tried.
Is that a word? Iconicity? That cannot be a word. I'm making it up. I'm going into business for myself. All right, Doom. Anything else?
It's not your worst mispronunciation.
Anything you want to add before we get out of here?
Wow, happy Metroid 2 OST is on the music app. Definitely wasn't the one I was expecting next. I thought it was gonna be Super Metroid, but that's still pretty cool nonetheless.
Yeah.
I'll definitely update my Metroid 2 remastered soundtrack with those new official titles now. We have official titles for that music now. That's so dope. I don't know. I'm geeking out over that. Most other people probably don't care. I think that's pretty awesome though. Yeah, I'm glad we ended the episode with that, because the rest of the episode, it was a downer, a very important downer, but yeah, that's pretty cool. I'm gonna check that out right after we finish up.
All right, there you go. Well, that's gonna do it for us then, my friends. Sorry for a little bit of a downer show, but these are important topics, and I feel like they warrant discussion. So, that being said, we are going to get out of here. Make sure that you check us out wherever you get your podcasts. Go like and subscribe and recommend and rate and review and all that kind of good stuff. If you do have a Metroid fan in your life, tell them about the Omega Metroid podcast. We are doing this show weekly somehow. We're doing a show every single week. So every Wednesday, you can find new episodes, and you can find them over at OmegaMetroid.com. In addition to all of the walkthroughs that we have, the written guides, the maps, the news, the editorials, there's a lot of stuff there if you are a Metroid fan. So go and check it out. And check out our YouTube page as well. Give us a subscription. You can watch these episodes in full video form. Plus, you can actually check out a lot of our video walkthroughs as well. We have new Metroid Fusion and Metroid Zero Mission video guides there by our pal Dominique. So those are coming up. And I believe we're one of the first people that's going to have like a 100% AM2R video walkthrough as well. So that's going to be over on the site or on the YouTube page within the next couple of days. So go and check that out. Give us a follow over on Blue Sky. I am at Spiteri316. Doom is at Doominal Cross. And we are at Omega Metroid. And lastly, if you want to take your Omega Metroid love to the next level, we do indeed have a Patreon, patreon.com/SPNet. The second episode of Gooey Plays Metroid. So one of my best friends is playing Metroid for the first time. He's made it into Ridley's lair, and he has conquered the beast. And now really all that's left is Kraid and Mother Brain. So we're documenting his journey, and we're going to move on to a new game after that. I'm pushing for Metroid Other M, but patrons are going to have the vote on what Goo plays next. I threw out there Metroid Prime 2. It's kind of like a Zelda game, so maybe Goo will like that. Regardless, patreon.com/SPNet. Tons of other great Metroid content there for you if you're a Metroid fan. That, my friends, is going to do it for us. So, until next week, everybody, take care.